Welcome all to the Pro Football Radio Podcast. This is your co-host, Jay Chima, with the pride and joy of Merrimack, New Hampshire, Sabuma. Welcome in, Brother Man, Podcast 142. How are you doing?
Doing great. Living the dream, Jay. Today was franchise tag deadline. Some people got tagged, some people did not. And we're going to talk about a big name that did get tagged and what the ramifications are in the league on that and fun stuff, Jay. I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I was telling you earlier today, I was on the phone with you for a little bit. You know, the NFL truly does not stop. It does not, skip a beat. I feel like we just got done with the Super Bowl just a little bit ago, right? And then all of a sudden you had the combine. People got worked up on that. Now all of a sudden we've got tag day. And then next week, we haven't even hit like free agency yet. So like the start of the league year is next week. A lot of things are rumbling. It's fun. It's fun. The NFL is always fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the big news that came out of today, Lamar Jackson got franchise tagged by the Baltimore Ravens. Now, it wasn't the actual full-on exclusive tag. It was the non-exclusive tag, which means basically he gets paid $32.4 million, but he has the ability to go out there and negotiate with any other team. Now, if they come to an agreement of what for a contract, then the Baltimore Ravens can either match that or ship him off to said team for 2 first-round picks. So, Puma, what's your thoughts on that? How do you think Lamar Jackson feels right now?
I feel like Lamar is a little bit pissed just because, kind of to him, he's probably feeling like, oh, this is how the Ravens value me. But, Jay, we've been banging this drum for, God knows, 2 months now, especially since we started going live with this. The Ravens were not going to get in the business of guaranteeing contracts in the NFL, regardless of position. The Ravens weren't going to do it. The NFL does not want to do it. And personally, I think every NFL owner is pissed at what the Haslams did with Deshaun Watson and giving him a fully guaranteed contract, because now every player in the NFL is going to potentially want this, especially at the quarterback position. So now, the Ravens are going to let the league set the market and the value for Lamar, and you can already count on one hand and a couple of other fingers on your other. How many teams have already said that they're out on wanting Lamar Jackson? The
Which
Dolphins
is shocking,
are out.
right?
Right. It's a former MVP that we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
The Dolphins are out on him. The Falcons are out on him, which is interesting because, maybe Desmond Ridder is the guy. We don't have access to what he has done in practice, but I feel like Lamar would fit what, Arthur Smith is trying to run down there in Atlanta for an offense. The Falcons are out. The Raiders can't afford him because, I don't think Al Davis's kid, Mark Davis, has enough money to put in escrow to fully guarantee anything. And the other thing too, Jay, not even get into like the X's and O's, because now you have to change the offense. What teams have the salary cap to give him $50 million fully guaranteed on a year-on, year-out basis? Like, it's really just the Falcons at this point that have the cap space.
Yeah, and here's my thought process. I am really, really torn if this is a good move by the Ravens or not, because part of me thinks, okay, this is basically them admitting, for 2 years we've been negotiating with this guy. We can't seem to come up with any sort of solution. So let's have the league set the market for us, right? So Lamar Jackson will go out there. He'll try to negotiate a contract. He'll come back to the Ravens, and if all is well, then they'll trade him to that team for 2 first-round picks. Now, the other part of me thinks, this is a bad move for the Ravens. Should he go to a different team, they would get 2 first-round picks back. In my opinion, 2 first-round picks is light for Lamar Jackson. Like, am I right here where, like, I feel like Trey Lance was 3 first-round picks, right? Deshaun Watson was 3 first-round picks. Lamar Jackson, no baggage at all, could get you 3+ picks. Well, it could be 3 first-rounders, a couple of second-rounders. So I think, I'm torn with how the Ravens played this. Part of me thinks it's a good move because now the NFL sets the market for them and they can kind of match it. But the other part of me thinks if he does walk and you basically let him go to a different team, all you get is 2 first-round picks back.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I definitely get that aspect of things. But when you look at, the quarterback pipeline per se, like with how athletic these guys have been. And we're going to hit on that at some point in the podcast today of like the Anthony Richardsons of the world who had a fantastic combine. You can get these guys on a rookie contract, 4 years guaranteed, 5th-year option, and then 2 franchise tags and move on to the next. Like, it's a bigger gamble because, first round draft picks are, a 50-50 split pretty much. But again, it just the NFL wants out of giving fully guaranteed contracts. It might sound like it wouldn't be the first time the NFL colluded on anything. Let me just put it to you that way.
Yeah.
But
so let me ask you this question, because I'm of the firm belief that Lamar Jackson is not signed that franchise tag. Like I truly believe he's not playing next year for $32.4 million. So what's your thought process? Do you think Lamar Jackson signs a franchise tag? And if he does, do you think he can stomach sitting there playing for just $32 million next year? Which by the way is a lot of money for all regular people like me and you. $32 million is an insane amount of money. But for his market value, the caliber player he is, that's $15 million below his average and what the league is paying for his type of player.
Right, but at least it's 32 fully guaranteed. But here's the thing, though, too. So just like a timeline for the tag. So he can negotiate with teams up until July 17th. The 17th is a cutoff time where the other teams can do a offer sheet. And this is where the Ravens can potentially match this or say, no, give us our 2 first-round draft picks. After the 17th, he has until the Tuesday after week 10 to sign that tender in order to have him have the year accrue towards free agency. Because if he doesn't sign it, he's not going to be a free agent the following season. So he's not. I don't think he's going to Le'Veon Bell himself, because we saw what happened with Le'Veon Bell when he did that with the Steelers, and he tried to play chicken with them, and they called this bluff, and that was that. So I think he's going to sign the tag. And they're going to.
When do you think he's going to sign the tag? Because that's key here, right? Like he couldn't drag this out all the way into training camp, right? Like I feel as if he's going to do whatever is possible to kind of delay signing that tag, and I don't know why I feel that way.
I think it'll be done before the season starts. I think because he can't play without it, and sure, Tyler Huntley could fill in until potentially week 10, but at the end of the day, like I also think if he doesn't sign that tender prior to the start of the season, the optics of that to like another team that may want to sign him in free agency, like let's say the Ravens do like the Washington Commanders to just keep tagging them until they can't anymore. Like, what are the optics of that going to be like down the road of, like, do we really want to like to try to negotiate with this guy? Like, is he going to be, hard guy to deal with type of deal? I think he'll sign before the start of the season. I don't think he's going to run the clock all the way down to 0 to week 10.
Okay, let's move this forward. So let's say he signs the franchise tender before the 17th of June or July, whatever the number was.
July.
So July. So basically he can go out there and negotiate with other teams. A lot of teams have already come out and said, we're not interested in Lamar Jackson, which, by the way, I don't understand. Now, it could be something like the Browns did a couple of years ago, because a couple of years ago, the Browns said they're not interested in Deshaun Watson, and then they traded for him. So it could just be smoke that teams are saying this now. But it seems like the Falcons are out on him. The Miami Dolphins are out on him. So if you had to guess right now, is there a certain team that could make a run at Lamar Jackson? And I know you got a pretty funny conspiracy theory here.
Jay, I'm glad you asked that question. I think it's going to be the team across the Beltway, and I think it's going to be the Washington Commanders, because Dan Snyder, prior to all of the nonsense that has gone on in that franchise, has come to light over the last couple of years. He has had a penchant of doing that big contract to players like Albert Haynesworth and Champ Bailey and Bruce Smith. He has no problem paying the extra money to get a marquee talent to his franchise. But the other thing, though, Jay, is let's say he does offer a fully guaranteed contract, and then within, let's say, 6 months, he sells the Washington Commanders. He's not paying that contract anymore.
Yeah,
that's that new team. So the ultimate bafangul to the NFL on the way out the door, while he's potentially getting $7 billion from Jeff Bezos or whatever group is going to buy that team, is, hey, I gave out a fully guaranteed contract. Adios, amigo. insert a couple other acronyms here. Yeah, I think the Washington Commanders could totally do that. But also, like let's say like Dan Snyder is not that petty, but we all know that he is. You have Lamar Jackson with a new offensive coordinator that he's been going to bat for a while and trying to get him a job in Eric Bieniemy. And let's say like
Yep.
maybe things don't work out at the start of the season. Ron Rivera might lose his job. They promote Eric Bieniemy to head coach. Now he's got the interim head coach, plays out the rest of the year, and then he's potentially the head coach the following season with Lamar Jackson. I don't think that's too far of a bridge to cross.
Yeah. And the Washington Commanders, they do have a solid roster. Like I was looking at their weapons the other day for our preview later on about the NFC East. I mean, they've got Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin. Like they've got some really good pieces to make it work with a good quarterback. Now, the Dan Snyder angle of this, I find it funny you brought that up just because we've talked about this before. I truly believe the reason why this is so ugly for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens is I believe that Steve Bisciotti, who is a seasoned, veteran of the NFL, is trying to take back the quarterback market. I mean, there's rumblings that a lot of these owners are not happy with where the quarterback market's going because obviously that affects their bottom line. As the contracts get bigger, less money in their pocket, right? Simple math. But it seems that what the Browns owners did, the Haslims with Deshaun Watson, seems to really irk a lot of these owners the wrong way. Whether it's Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, Steve Bisciotti, all these like hardened grizzled veterans of the NFL, they're trying to take the quarterback market back, and it starts with Lamar Jackson. And imagine if on the way out, Dan Snyder gives them one final middle finger salute with a fully guaranteed contract. Because then it provides precedence, right? Because right now, Deshaun Watson is a single case in NFL history, first fully guaranteed contract. But now you got two of them, right? Now you've got a can of worms with every quarterback coming down the line, essentially wanting a guaranteed contract.
Yeah, you have. I mean, let's look down the road. You have Joe Burrow. You have Tua. You have Justin Herbert. Like the list goes on and on and on. So yeah, this would be like the ultimate point. In business, they call it like the poison pill, where like the shareholders like do whatever they can to make the stock of that company that the new person that's going to buy it make look as unappealing as humanly possible. That would be like a poison pill contract right there. And there's nothing the league can do about it because Dan Snyder is well within his right. If he has the cap space and he has the money he can put in escrow, maybe that's like the ultimate like nuclear option that Dan Snyder's always had in his back pocket of, oh, I'll make the owners pay type of deal if they really try to force me to sell this team. All right, you can force me to sell this team. Have fun having Jeff Bezos pay $50 million on a year annually for the next 6 years. Man, I would be here for it.
Yeah. Before we move on to Aaron Rodgers, we've got a comment from a Joe Russillo.
Up
on the screen there. He says,
"Look at that! First time, long time, friend of the podcast, Joe Russillo. Glad you're in the chat. Glad you're enjoying this pod. Love it."
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening and interacting, Joe. All right, let's talk about some stuff here. The Aaron Rodgers saga. It just seems to go on and on, doesn't it, huh?
My God, it's like the Energizer Bunny, man. But it's like it's fait accompli at this point.
Yeah. Well, the latest rumblings are the New York Jets, a contingent of them, whether it was their head coach, a general manager, owner, got on a flight today from New York, went out to California to meet with Aaron Rodgers. The thought process being, it seems that Aaron Rodgers' options are dwindling. It seems like he's either going to be playing for the New York Jets this year, playing for the Green Bay Packers, or retiring. I'm of the mindset that Aaron Rodgers is probably not retiring. He's probably playing this year just because, this is the same year Tom Brady retired. So 5 years from now, I feel like Aaron Rodgers wouldn't want to share the day of going to the Hall of Fame with Tom Brady. I feel like he would want his own day. So with that being said, do you think it's basically a done deal between Aaron Rodgers and the Jets? Because I feel like it's starting to get there. Like the heat is there. There's so much fire between these two that it's probably going to end up happening in the next week or so, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. I think this, like I said at the top, this is fait accompli. This is what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. And it's for the Jets, which is funny because, the Jets missed out on Derek Carr. And some people would say, oh my God, like Derek Carr is plan A, like that's get out of here. It's Aaron Rodgers. Jay, like the back of the New York Post today had a picture of Aaron Rodgers and it said Plan B. And there were a couple of Jets people that I work with, Jets fans that I work with, and they were actually kind of bummed that they missed out on Derek Carr because they don't want the baggage of Aaron Rodgers going to the Big Apple because we talked about it off air. But like, how much buy-in does Aaron have? Like, if you're going to be giving up all these draft picks, like, are you going to show up to OTAs to get that relationship with your young wide receiver core that you've been begging for while you're in Green Bay, but you always have like the passive aggressiveness and put people in a doghouse?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to actually commit to playing for more than 1 year? Because if I'm the Jets and I'm giving up minimum 2 first, like, the Broncos gave up 2 first-round picks or 3 first-rounders and a couple of second-round picks to get Russell Wilson. Like, how much are the Jets are going to have to give up? They're like 2 minimum.
Budweiser.
Look at that. But they're going to have to give up. They're going to have, a handful of first-round picks, 2, 3 minimum, just to get them. Like, why are you going to do that and then have them potentially retire at the end of the season? Like, you're going to have to get some guarantees from Aaron and his camp of how much buy-in there is. And then, one of the people I work with brought up a good point. He had a lot of questions about like the COVID vaccine and all that nonsense. He's working for the family that runs Johnson & Johnson. Like, this is fantastic. Like, this is going to be great. The Jets are going to get him because the only other option at this point is Jimmy G, who's probably going to stub his toe in training camp and break his leg somehow. The Baker Mayfield experiment, like maybe, hey, we always wanted Baker instead of Sam Darnold. We're just going to get Baker like 5 or 6 years later. Like, you're going to get the Baker Mayfields of the world. Like, they were potentially kicking the tires on bringing Geno Smith back. Like, you're going to have to get this guy. Whether or not he's going to take a flamethrower to that locker room, I am here for it, Jay. I am here for it.
Popcorn worthy stuff with how badly his, demeanor and the New York media market is going to mesh because they're going to eat him alive. They are going to absolutely eat him alive. And if I'm the New York Jets and I'm sitting down with Aaron Rodgers today, I really only want to know one thing from him. I want to know, how committed are you? Because reports have come out of Green Bay that the Packers are disgusted with him because when he signed his extension last year, he basically checked out. He didn't show up for the offseason. He didn't put in work with the new wide receivers, a bunch of rookie wide receivers that needed to mesh with him. He was not in any of those meetings. He basically showed up day 1 of training camp and said, let's roll the balls out. And that's not how it's done in the NFL. It's a process from March all the way to the first game. So I want to know, if I'm Woody Johnson, just how committed he is, because right now, Aaron Rodgers is guaranteed $110 million over the next 2 years. I believe was 59 this year and then 41 the next year. I might have that backwards, but it's $110 million over the next 2 years. That's a lot of money to invest in somebody that isn't fully committed. So if I'm sitting down with him today, I'm trying to figure out, what's this guy all about, right? And the second question that, not the owner doesn't have to answer this, but the front office people, as they break down his tape, does he still have it? Because let's be real. For 2 years, back-to-back, he won MVP with Nathaniel Hackett. Last year, he declined in every single statistical category. Like, everything he did last year was a slide from where he was. And I know, Tom Brady has basically muddy the water with some of this stuff because Tom Brady went to a new team and won immediately. So now everybody thinks, hey, listen, you put Aaron Rodgers on a New York Jets stack roster, you win the Super Bowl, right? That's not really how the NFL works. We saw a prime example of this last year where Russell Wilson went to a loaded roster in Denver and it was an absolute train wreck. So, it's not a guarantee that if Aaron Rodgers does show up to New York and, is on that roster, they're going to win the Super Bowl. So we'll have to kind of talk about that. Now, the one thing I want to ask you is, what is the ceiling for the Jets with Aaron Rodgers? Because, everybody thinks the Super Bowl or bust at this point, but do you think, is Super Bowl in the cards there? Like, what do you think is the ceiling for the Jets with Aaron Rodgers?
Assuming Aaron Rodgers has a unlimited supply of ayahuasca to keep that man's ass calm in the locker room and with the media.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say potentially an AFC Championship game. I think it's just going to be
Wow,
super.
really?
I just think it with that defense, which has been borderline elite last year. Let's assume they take care of their boy and they bring back Quentin Williams on a contract extension that he's been looking for. I think they could potentially make a run deep in the playoffs. And if they fell into the AFC Championship game against like the Chiefs or the Bills or the Bengals, I would not be shocked.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in reality land, like the NFC East, the NFC as a whole is cakewalk compared to the Hell in a Cell known as the the American Football Conference with the
Yeah.
Chiefs and the Bengals, and the Steelers have always been a tough out, and the Bills and the Dolphins, assuming like Tua can keep his head on his shoulders, and like the Browns are going to potentially not surprise some people. They're going to be getting what they got from the contract with Deshaun Watson. So like they're going to be able to make a run potentially in the playoffs, but that's assuming Aaron Rodgers isn't moody. He's actually going to show up and connect with these players. So like ultimate ceiling for me, AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
Reality land with the landscape of the AFC, a wild card. Like I would definitely have that as kind of like the minimum where the bar is going to be set.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that it's gonna be a wild card win, and that's it. Like I truly believe that because I've always said that Aaron Rodgers is a fraudulent leader. I think he's a leader that doesn't have what it takes to win on a consistent basis. Because winning in the NFL is one of the hardest things to do, and you've got to have a backbone. And as a quarterback, that backbone has to basically your team has to take on your identity, right, to win in the playoffs. So I think on talent alone, they could probably win the division, depending on how the Buffalo Bills are going to look next year. I feel as if the Buffalo Bills are going to have a little bit of a step back next year. The Patriots, there's nothing to worry about. And then the Miami Dolphins, if Tua's hurt, then obviously they're nothing to worry about either. So, it comes down to, I think they can win the division, but I think they're going to get bounced in the divisional round. They won the wild card against a crappier team, but they're not going to make it. They're not going to go any further than that. And this is, the same old thing again, where everybody thinks just like Tom Brady went down to Tampa Bay, you can just stick somebody on a team like that and you can win. I just don't think it's possible. It takes a lot more than just that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nope, for sure.
Now, before we move on to the NFC East preview, a lot has happened, right? Daniel Jones got some stupid money. Geno Smith got some stupid money. Derek Carr got some stupid money. What is a move that you've seen over the last couple of days that's really kind of made you sit back and think, what the hell is happening here? Like, what are we doing?
Honestly, it was
Daniel
the Giants
Jones
news today.
Yeah, Daniel Jones,
And Jay, you like the Derek Carr, like you say the Derek Carr contract stupid, the Geno Smith one is stupid. I mean, honestly, I will take those contracts
compared to what the
over
Giants did. Yeah.
43 million, 80 guaranteed over the first 2 years for a guy who threw 15 touchdown passes. Like I would take, Geno Smith or Derek Carr over Daniel Jones. And for those that, didn't see the news, literally minutes before the deadline today on whether or not the Giants were going to tag him or not, they hammered out a deal, 4 years, 168 million, 80 something guaranteed. So like you're looking at an annual value of like 40 million a year. But like the back end of the contract essentially is funny money. So it's essentially a 2-year deal. But that allowed them to keep Daniel Jones and then hit Saquon Barkley with the franchise tag. It just, to me, looking back, like if this was the contract that they were going to do, then they have massively mishandled not picking up the 5th-year option and then just tagging him after that, because I think this is going to be an albatross of a contract. A lot of Giants fans that I hear calling in on WFAN and one that's near and dear to our hearts, friend of the pod, Fawad Shima, aka your brother,
of the pod,
has been badgering all season long. Oh, his practice squad. Oh, this offensive line's going to get him killed. Oh, he's got nobody to throw to. You are getting paid $80 million over 2 years now. you better figure out a way to cut by hook or by crook win some games, because he hasn't won a whole lot in his first 4 years. And yeah, Brian Daboll may have unlocked him, but you were paying, what was the math, Jay? $3 million per touchdown from last year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think this is the first misstep in the Brian Daboll, Joe Shane era.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. I mean, I think here's what happened. They wanted to make sure they kept both Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. And to make sure that you tagged Saquon Barkley, they gave Daniel Jones a contract that was well worth above his pay grade. That's simply what happened. They panicked. They tagged Saquon Barkley to keep him in house, and then they gave a stupid contract to Daniel Jones. And I think it's the first misstep in their regime. Now, look at the numbers itself. It's $160 million plus $35 million in incentives. So you're looking at 195 divided by 4. That's a $48.5 million potential contract if he hits all those incentives. That is stupid money. That is absolutely stupid money for Daniel Jones. So, I mean, listen, I think the kid is he's all right. Like, what are we doing here? He has 15 touchdowns last year. I'm not saying he's bad. He's not the Daniel Jones of past, but he's getting paid like he's a top 5 quarterback now, and he does not produce like a top 5 quarterback. 15 touchdowns. Here's a crazy stat. Last year, Daniel Jones started how many games? 16?
Mm-hmm.
He's thrown 15 touchdowns. All last 3 years so far of his career, all 3 years, he's played more games than touchdowns he's thrown.
Wow.
Let that sink in. That is so stupid.
You know what this is, Jay? Like, and I said it in the group chat with your brother. This reminds me of the contract the Jacksonville Jaguars gave out to Blake Bortles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that was right after they went to the AFC Championship game, or maybe it was the year before. But like, they backed up the Brinks truck for him, and that is when the wheels fell off the bus. And like, it's almost like for Giants fans, maybe they have like amnesia. This is what happened with Eli. Like, they gave him an insane amount of money because of 2 things. One, they rested their laurels on like the 2 Super Bowls that they won. And 2, like, ownership just liked the guy as like a good human, which is fine. Which is fine. But like, the Maras and the Tishes like Daniel Jones for being a person. But there's a reason why this coaching staff and the general manager did not pick up the 50-year option on this guy, because they didn't think he could be the guy. He's just a dude. Like, he's middle of the pack. He's like Kirk Cousins, he, like Jimmy G. Like, he's right there. And all I can say is, I hope they play the Minnesota Vikings a lot on the schedule coming up, because like, that's the only way I can justify this contract making sense. And I mean, what's going to happen, Jay? Like, are they really going to tag? Like, because like, the big thing that with this franchise has been, DJ has never been able to play a full season with Saquon Barkley. Okay, so you have potentially a full season with Saquon Barkley under the franchise tag. Are they just going to keep tagging Saquon until they can't tag him anymore? Like, you're going to have to find out what Daniel Jones is without Saquon Barkley for the foreseeable future. Like, you're going to be throwing to Richie James a lot, and you're going to be throwing to Hodges a lot too.
Well, I don't know why they tagged Saquon Barkley. Like, you can find a running back anywhere in the draft. Like, you took the Chiefs took Isaiah Pacheco, 7th round rookie, and he produced just fine. And I've seen the Patriots over the years just cycle through running backs left and right. It's a devalued position in the NFL, and I cannot believe that they allowed their fear of losing Saquon Barkley and getting him tagged to warrant this stupid ass contract to Daniel Jones. Now, listen, it's on them. It's on them. They got to do what they got to do. Go ahead.
You know why they tagged him?
Why?
Because the Tishes and Maras also love Saquon Barkley as a person.
Damn.
That is it.
That's so stupid. If that's
the case, I'm going to put some friggin' pads on, and I'm going to try to be buddy with the Maras and Tishes to try to get $40 million out of them.
Yeah, you bring their favorite Starbucks to them every single day, right?
Yes, exactly.
Well, last point here. At the money contract that Daniel Jones is at now, the expectations are for him to elevate his team. Because now at $40 million a pop, that takes money away from getting you a nice offensive lineman, get you a nice wide receiver, getting you a nice running back. So now Daniel Jones has to elevate his team, and we're gonna really find out what he's made of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Jay, we were talking about this. Like, I want to see a minimum of. I mean, you said it. Like, he has to double his production. So
If he doubles
32,
his production to
32
30
touchdowns.
touchdowns, if he doubles his production to 30 touchdowns, it's still not top 5 worthy stats
Mm-hmm.
wise.
Nope. But they're gonna have to. He's gonna have to make leaps and bounds. Like, there's
Mhm.
no excuse now. So, like, now, if he does bortle it up, I don't want to hear a peep from Giants fans being
Oh, you
like,
will.
"Oh, it built in the excuses. Oh, it's practice squad." Well, it's kind of hard to get a top 5 or top tier wide receiver when you're paying Blake Bortles 1.2 $40 million.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. All right. Anything else we hit on before we jump into our NFC East
Nah,
preview?
NFC East.
NFC East
Focus on
preview. Here we
Jones.
come. All right, let's talk about the 3-point plan for the Eagles offseason. We're doing this series on a weekly basis where last week we touched on the AFC East teams. This week it's the NFC East teams. Next week we don't know who it is just yet. But if you had to give me your 3 points right now for the offseason game plan for the Philadelphia Eagles, what do you think? What would that be?
I think they're gonna have to address the running back position. I mean, it seems like it's always been like the Boston Scott, Miles Sanders with a little bit of Kenny Gainwell sprinkled in there. I feel like they're not that sold on Miles Sanders being the guy, so I think they're going to go back in the draft and potentially find their own Isaiah Pacheco. On the offensive line, I think they're going to have to address some issues because Jason Kelsey's not getting any younger. Lane Johnson's been having, I mean, he gutted through an injury. I think he had surgery. He's slated to have surgery. So he might be, out for a bit. So I definitely think they're going to have to address the offensive line issue. And I kind of want to see what this coaching staff is going to look like because they lost both their offensive and defensive coordinators to head coaching gigs in the Indianapolis Colts and the Arizona Cardinals. So I want to see how that's going to play out with things and see if Jalen Hurts is going to be able to build off of. I mean, let's call it for what it is. It would have been a MVP season if he
Didn't get hurt.
have the shoulder injury.
Yeah, mine's is very simple as well. Number one, you got to sign Jalen Hurts to an extension. Number two, you got to prioritize which free agents can walk and which ones you got to keep in house. And number three, you got to figure out your defensive coordinator position. And is Sean Desai going to be the guy? So number one, Jalen Hurts. Sign to him an extension as soon as possible. He's the guy. There's no need to prolong this. The more you wait, the higher his price gets. And it's imperative that you sign him before Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Herbert sign. Because the second they sign, what's Jalen Hurts going to do? He's going to go to the front office and be like, listen, this is what they signed for. I went to the Super Bowl last year. Herbert didn't even go there. Lamar Jackson never went to one. And Joe Burrow, who went to one, obviously he's getting paid a shit ton. So I want to match that contract. So you get this done ASAP. You get ahead of it and don't destroy the mojo you have going on right now. You see what's happening in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. Number two, 11 out of the 22 starters could potentially be gone. Like that, I didn't realize that when I'm doing my prep for this podcast. 11 of 22 starters could walk in free agency.
And they didn't tag anybody, Jay. They tagged zero.
So
Nothing.
when you have that many people up for contracts, that means a lot of them are going to walk. It's just how the NFL business model is set up, right? So you got to prioritize the ones that you need for your core group of players. You've got to keep players like James Bradbury or Javon Hargrove. You can, but you can replenish some of the other guys that walk. So Miles Sanders, like you said, Miles Sanders is nothing special. He disappeared down the stretch. So let him walk. You can replenish him. Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, you can let those guys walk as well. There's a good chance they've played their last games as Philadelphia Eagles. They're in their 30s. There's a good chance they're not going to be on the roster again. But you got to prioritize James Bradbury and Javon Hargrove in the 10th degree, in like the most degree possible. And then finally, Sean Desai. He's a new defensive coordinator. And what we saw out of that Philadelphia Eagles defense in the Super Bowl is like scarring. Like I was stunned at just how bad Jonathan Gannon and that team were outclassed by Andy Reid. Now, obviously, Andy Reid is a hell of an offensive coordinator, and he can scheme up and fool you. but they were at certain times they weren't even within like striking distances from the players. So hopefully Sean Desai is a better defensive coordinator than Jonathan Gannon, and hopefully they can be better, well prepared for the games as the season rolls on. I mean, we said this before the Super Bowl started. I had a feeling the Eagles defense was a little fraudulent just because they really didn't get tested by nobody. All the quarterbacks they played against were not the best. So the second they saw a real quarterback, it was basically lights out. I mean, they looked lost out there.
Yep. And Sean Desai, fun fact, pride and joy of Shelton, Connecticut.
No way. Are you serious?
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
Pride and joy. I think he played high school football up here right down the road from my house. And he, I believe, won a state title or went to a state title. But Sean Desai, pride and joy of Shelton, Connecticut.
Wow, look at that. You probably run into him at the local the spot you go get your bagel in the morning. Or if you see him
the good old Big Y. Probably, but
well, what's that bagel spot? What's that bagel spot you go to? You get the rolls, the Portuguese rolls?
Oh, Auntie's Cafe. I get my sausage, egg, and cheese with a hash brown on a hard roll.
That stuff is good, dude. That stuff is good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to a 3-point plan for the Dallas Cowboys. This should be fun. Hey, let me start this off real quick. I have a lot of things to say here, especially about Dak Prescott.
The floor is yours.
My first point for the Dallas Cowboys in this offseason is you've got to draft a replacement for Dak Prescott. And you cannot, under any circumstances, extend him. There is this rumbling coming out of Dallas that they might extend him again, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking to myself, bro, the guy's peaked. Like, he is who he is. He's 30 years old now. He's been in the league for 9 years, and he has not produced what you want him to produce. And he's simply not that guy. And there's a reason why the Cowboys have been sniffing around CJ Stroud and a couple of other draft prospects at the combine. So first things first, draft a replacement for Dak and do not extend him. Secondly, I did these notes a couple days ago, and the note was you've got to keep Dallas Pollard in-house somehow. And today they franchise tagged him. So Tony Pollard, stunning running back. Like he played at a phenomenal level last year. I believe it was 5.9 per touch, which was by far the best, and a career high of 5.1 yards per carry. So he seems to be the future of running back. You have to keep him in house. You franchise tagged him. He's staying in house. That's perfect. And then finally, you've got to add another piece on the other side of CeeDee Lamb. You got to do whatever you can to provide another option for Dak Prescott, whether it's going out there and trying to get DeAndre Hopkins via trade, or you take somebody in the draft. A name that I like for these guys is Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, maybe at 26 he's still there. Big-bodied, explosive receiver. So that's my 3-point plan for the Cowboys this offseason.
Nice. Right there with you on the CeeDee Lamb bit. I mean, we saw this was kind of like the move that the Cowboys made last year, and that kind of bit them in the ass down the stretch of times in the NFL season. Was they got rid of Amari Cooper and they made it like CeeDee Lamb was the guy, and they were just throwing coverage to him, and it was really like the only other option was Dalton Schultz, and Dalton Schultz is probably going to be walking in free agency because he didn't get tagged. Tony Pollard did. So getting a complimentary piece, whether or not it's Jerry Jones doing Jerry Jones things and trading for DeAndre Hopkins, or you go in the draft. So I'm gonna call the Bidwells. I'm a good friend of the Bidwells. He's come on my yacht a couple of times, and we're gonna work out a deal to get DeAndre Hopkins here, because we had Amari Cooper, who was, similar in age somewhat, and we kicked him to the curb. So but we like DeAndre a little bit more, even though he potentially has lost a step, but we'll bring him in and put that star on the side of his helmet, and he'll be a Cowboy saying, how about them Cowboys?
How about them
Cowboys? But in reality, they have to get another wide receiver. The other thing too, 1B is that offensive line, because it should not come down to whether or not one person's in the lineup that's going to determine if that offensive line is going to be an absolute shambles. They have to get an offensive lineman. If there's not one if there's not a wide receiver you love at 26, but there's an offensive lineman there, get an offensive lineman. But you have to protect Dak, or you're going to have to protect his potential successor at some point too. Like the offensive line, which has been a strength for the Cowboys for almost a decade has literally whittled away in front of our eyes pretty much since like Tony Romo left. So like you have to address that offensive line issue. And then the other one is I want to see what this offense looks like with Brian Schottenheimer and
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the head coach, the buffoon whose name
Mike
is
McCarthy.
Mike McCarthy, clearly
Yeah.
not memorable for me right now. But like Mike McCarthy hasn't called a game since he left Green Bay,
Mm-hmm.
and their offense was top 5 in a lot of the statistical categories under Kellen Moore. And now you have Brian Schottenheimer, who had a issue with the offensive play calling that Russell Wilson wanted to do, and Brian Schottenheimer just wanted to run the football like it was 1985. So I want to see what this offense looks with those two gentlemen at the helm.
Yeah, I wonder if it's gonna be something that helps out Dak Prescott because he threw leading 3.8% interception rate for Dak Prescott.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if the running attack is more prevalent in that offense, maybe it takes some pressure off him. Maybe he doesn't make all those mistakes because I mean, looking back on it this year, he was wild some games. Some games he's just throwing without even looking where he's throwing to. That game against the Washington Commanders, he threw a pick. I'm like, what are you even looking at? So
He looked like Wentz.
mhm. He looked shot. He really did. And I truly believe that's why one of my main points was to make sure you draft a replacement for Dak Prescott. I think he's cashed. He's peaked. He is who he is. This is 9 years into his NFL career. I don't know why I'm doing the Italian thing, but this is 9 years into his NFL career, and I'm sorry, he's not the guy. He's not going to take it to the Super Bowl, man.
And Jay, maybe it's like the eye test for me, but like, is it me or does it just seem like he hasn't run or he hasn't scrambled a lot since he broke his leg?
Yep. Yep.
Like,
I think you're right. I'm sure if you dig at the stats, I'm sure the stats back up that feeling. But I get it though. I mean, he basically saw his ankle come out the side of his leg,
mm-hmm.
so maybe he's taking a more cautious approach to his game, which is obviously hurting him.
Right, exactly, because that was like the thing with Russell Wilson was like, oh, like he'll at least move the sticks and he'll make plays with his feet and he'll move the pocket. Like Russell didn't do that last year, and that was also like a comp a little bit of Dak Prescott. And he looked like me in math class when I was called for homework a couple of times in that pocket and with some of the reads that he was doing. So I don't know listen, I don't blame him. I'm not taking shots at him for being a little bit more hesitant with, how bad of a leg injury that he had. I mean, that could have gone the way of Alex Smith type of deal. Yep. So I don't blame him at all. But I mean, if part of your game is being able to move and move the chains, yeah, that's going to be a big problem. So like, if you can get CJ Stroud, waiting in the wings type of deal on, let's not forget a rookie contract. Yep. That would be fantastic.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the 3-point plan for the New York Football Giants. And the first, I'll let you take the lead here.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. What money do they even have left, Jay? Let's see. I mean, they need to address the wide receiver issue because Sterling Shepard is going to be gone in free agency, and he's coming off of that, ACL injury. I believe it's actually at home on the AstroTurf field. So you're going to have to figure out the wide receiver position because, Hodgers is great, and sure, Richie James is a guy, but I mean, you're going to have to get a stud. Now, whether or not that's your boy from Ohio State. What's his name, Jay? Don't want to botch it.
CJ Stroud?
Oh,
a wide receiver. Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I call him JSN because it's just so much easier. And everybody around Ohio calls him JSN as well.
If you're going to have to get a JSN, you're going to have to get a wide receiver to open up that playbook a little bit more. Offensive line, definitely need to address that as well too. At this point, it's going to have to be in the draft because they're not going to spend money now on Orlando Brown, who's going to be the best offensive lineman in the free agency pool. But they're not going to pay him that money, in my opinion. So if you go in the draft, you get an offensive lineman, absolutely. And I feel like the defense is going to need to, also improve a little bit more during the stretch. So that's going to be my 3-point plan is the defensive side of the football. Dexter Lawrence looked fantastic. He looked like the first-round draft pick that he was at 13 a couple of years ago. I mean, Leonard Williams, I'm not too sure off the top of my head what his contract looks like. Worst case, he'll play out this year and he'll be out the door the following season. But they're going to have to build on that defense, whether or not it's on the defensive line. Personally, I think that secondary needs to be addressed first out of anything because they were burnt toast at times during the season. But that defense definitely needs to be looked at if they're going to make a run in the playoffs, even if it is the still NFC least. I'm not buying that NFC beast bullshit. Nope.
So my first point was going to be figure out the Daniel Jones contract / tag situation. That obviously has already been taken care of today. We hit this in the earlier part of the podcast, rewind and listen to it. We went in fairly hard on the fact that we think that Daniel Jones fleeced the New York Giants. He basically took him for a ride. So don't want to elaborate too much on that one because we already hit on that one. But then the second one is, you've got to develop Evan Neal. Like, Evan Neal was going to be that plug and play, high prize Alabama offensive lineman. You stuck him there last year and he's going to be phenomenal. He wasn't. He was pretty spotty, sometimes flat out bad. So whatever you got to do this offseason to get him into the weight room, training, nutrition, whatever it is, you've got to make sure he develops into the offensive line, that offensive lineman that he could be. So, he's going to be the anchor of that O-line going forward. So he's got to make sure he's doing well. And then finally, number 3, you hit on it as well. You got to go after weapons for Daniel Jones. Obviously, $40 million is what they got paid for Daniel Jones. So it's going to be hard to go after some prize, weapons. But, you can't get creative enough. I always believe cap is crap. And you can, if you really want somebody, you can definitely get them on the roster. So if they go after Brandon Ayuk, that could be somebody. T. Higgins was out there a couple weeks ago, but then looks like the Bengals shut that down quickly. And they might go in the draft. I mean, at 25, if JSN falls that low, then he could potentially be a good replacement for a good option for Daniel Jones as well.
You think Joe Shane is going to be drastic in the draft and maybe move up the board to get him? If he's reading the board and he sees like JSN might be going before he gets a shot at the apple, you think he'll get up to the 15s?
Yeah, I mean, I think he will be aggressive because it's cheaper to go in that route, right? Instead of going out there and spending a bunch of money on a Brandon Ayuk or T. Higgins or even a Jacoby Myers, like I think you go in the draft, you find a JSN and you try to take him. Now, if he's gone, then there's still other wide receivers out there. It is a little bit of a weaker wide receiver class. I think in general, and we'll hit on this more in the next couple of weeks, but this is a fairly weak class for most prospects. Like, I can't think of one standout position like, oh my God, there's like 10 of them there. So I think it's going to be a little bit of an interesting play for the Giants. But if they really like somebody, they better be aggressive because there's not many talented wide receivers in the draft this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, sir, the Washington Commanders,
the commies,
formerly known as the Washington Football Team. 3-point plan for those guys. What do you got, Puma?
Besides getting a new owner, let's see. The quarterback position, because Sam Howell finally got a bite at the apple at the end of the season. But I mean, let's call it for what it is. That Wentz experiment was a colossal failure. Taylor Heineke was good in stretches, but then they went back to Carson Wentz and he cost them a playoff spot. And it seemed like Ron Rivera forgot that they needed to win in order to get into the playoffs potentially. So they need to address the quarterback position. Now, whether or not they stick with Sam Howell, who, sure, he looked great in that last game of the season, but it was also the last game of the season. Like, we don't know what he's looked like during the entire season. We haven't seen the practices, but I'm guessing like they like him enough to potentially have him be the guy. But like I said, the earlier part of the segment, you can rewind and listen to it. If Dan Snyder went after Lamar Jackson to be the quarterback and address that issue, pair him with Eric Bieniemy, I won't be shocked at all. But that's definitely one route they could go. Not too sure if they'll go through the draft, but maybe in free agency, maybe they'll talk themselves into getting Jimmy Garoppolo.
Garoppolo.
They're gonna have to address that quarterback issue. Which, God, it's just the commies are so bad. And then and then the other two, it's both on the defensive side of the football. It's going to be is Chase Young going to hit that potential that he was drafted to be? And I understand he had a pretty bad knee injury, the ACL, the PCL, and I think he tore another ligament in there. So he had a long road to recovery coming back, and he played like 1 or 2 games last season. But I mean, he's going to have to step up and fill the holes massively for this defensive side of football, which was, I mean, bottom of the league in pretty much every statistical category, blatantly horrid in generating turnovers in the secondary, which is going to be my other part of the defense that they need to work on is the cornerback position or the linebacker. I mean, they need to get some bodies back there that can generate turnovers and, take the heat off of the defensive line that really was just, Deron Payne at times, and Jonathan Allen at times really getting any pressure up front. So they're going to have to address that. And then kind of like I'm throwing a fourth bullet point in there, but like it's blatantly obvious for this team, the offensive line, because they let Brandon Sheriff walk last year in free agency. And he went to Jacksonville. And Sheriff, in my opinion, is probably top 5 offensive lineman in the NFL today. They let him walk, and that offensive line was god-awful. Like, it was a sieve. I'm pretty sure they were probably the only team in the NFL that was at double-digit offensive lineman combinations throughout the season. And like a 17 weeks in the season, they hit double digits on different combos. So the offensive line is a massive hole that needs to be plugged as well too.
Yeah. And I'm right there with you with my number one bullet point for the offseason, man. The Commanders, another offseason, another question mark at quarterback. Like, I feel like this is 6-7 years in a row where we really have no idea who's going to be the quarterback. Listen, it's very simple. You've got to find a franchise quarterback of the future. You can't just keep doing this over and over again on a yearly basis. On top of that, looking at the roster, like Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, that is sneaky, could be the best wide receiver room in the NFL. That's right up there with some of the best weapons in the NFL. So whatever you got to do to get a franchise quarterback, I like your idea earlier of going after Lamar Jackson hardcore, even though, it could be an FU on the way out by the owner, but still it would plug in a nice quarterback at that position. So that's got to happen. You got to find a quarterback. Number 2, you can't let Deron Payne walk in free agency. Like, you hit on it. He's one of the best defensive tackles on the market, and it's important you bring him back. Him with Sweat, and obviously when Chase Young gets healthy, that's formidable. Like, you can't really mess with that. And then number 3, the back end of the defense. It's horrid. Like, you've got to go after a cornerback hardcore at number 16. Obviously it's a little early for draft talk, but I've got a couple guys in mind. Illinois cornerback Devin Witherspoon or South Carolina cornerback Cam Smith. I think both guys are perfect for that fit. Long-range cornerbacks that could do really well in that system.
Yep. And then, of course, on top of that, change of ownership.
Yeah.
Get the bad juju out. But can you also imagine, like, the Commanders, like, that stadium is god awful. Like, FedEx Field is a dump. But, like, to go back to Lamar real quick, like, you bring Lamar in there, you're now going to actually have home fans in the stands. It's not going to be an easy road game that people are going to fly into to see, like, the Dallas Cowboys or whatever. You'll be able to have your own home fans at FedEx Field rocking. And then looking down the road, like, having Lamar Jackson as your quarterback is going to potentially open doors to get new like land deals so you can have a new stadium. And this is also assuming that Dan Snyder's not going to be there anymore. But you have Lamar Jackson there. That's going to help the value of the franchise, and that's going to help with potentially getting a land deal, because FedEx is god awful. We've all seen the videos of sewage coming down, and like it's like a 120 seats, 120,000 seat stadium that they have to close up. It's like the Oakland Coliseum for the Oakland A's in baseball, but like on the East Coast version of that. It's like a toxic waste dump. They need to get a new stadium. I think Lamar Jackson could help that.
Yeah. And I know earlier you brought it up and you were joking, but the more I think about it, I think Daniel Snyder, as a last-ditch effort to try to win some fans back in his corner, could make that big swing. Imagine making that big swing for Lamar Jackson and all the negative press, everything that's happened the last 6 years in Washington. It doesn't get washed away, but people start thinking about him in a different light. Like, winning cures everything. Simply put, if the Washington football team started winning, Washington Commanders now, if the Washington Commanders started winning next year with Lamar Jackson, it would cure a lot of problems for Daniel Snyder.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I'm telling you, it is not beyond the realm of possibility.
That's a good point, Puma. That's a good point. Clap,
Dan
clap.
Snyder is going to open that checkbook and say, oh, House Committee of Investigations? Oh, Washington Post? Bafangul, I'm going to get this guy and either, like, the NFL is going to have to suck on it, or I'll just be like, hey, Bank of America, let's actually do that deal with Jeff Bezos now. And in the words of that coach and that gif or that meme, tell them to bring me my money.
Absolutely. All right, before we move on to the last topic, we've got a special guest that dropped a comment.
Oh, look at that. The better half in the pod.
Mrs. Puma. Mrs. Puma saying hello.
Yes. Love you. This is great. But yeah, no, it's great. Great to have everybody tuning in. Love this so much.
All right, and then final segment today, best performance from the NFL Combine. NFL Combine has come and gone. You watched some of it. I watched some of it. I watched a lot of highlights of it. Who do you think stood out to you? Was there somebody that was like, oh, wow, that guy's definitely, stock rose in those 3 days?
The blatantly obvious one is Anthony Richardson, AR-15. I mean, that dude with like a 48.5-inch vertical, and then like the long jump, and he had the blazing 4.40. Like that just solidified a lot of these guys, like the Colts, the Texans, and everybody else. It's hey, like this is potentially like a franchise and potentially game altering quarterback that we have here. Like Cam Newton, like if Cam Newton and had like another like little love child, that's AR-15 here. Like he's built like a brick shit house. And you get potentially, you get the potential of like a Josh Allen with the arm. It's just going to come down to whether or not like the NFL is going to really roll the dice on burning like a top 5 pick on Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. It's funny because you always give me crap, Puma, for having my 14-leg parlays. You're always like, oh my God, it's never going to hit.
Point taken.
Meanwhile, NFL GMs are literally just like gambling away their future for a potential, for like something small that might not even happen. So I don't know what's taken a hold of the NFL with Anthony Richardson. I feel like he's mesmerized everybody. But other than him, I was really impressed with Stetson Bennett, CJ Stroud, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Keep an eye out for DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's one of those quarterbacks that's going to fly under the radar, but whoever takes him as a developmental guy is going to be really happy with him. He plays for Chip Kelly in the UCLA fast track offense, so obviously he's got to have speed. I mean, the kid's you got to move to be able to play in Chip Kelly's offense. So
he looked good against USC.
Yes, he did. He's got a good arm. He's got a good head on his shoulders. I personally wouldn't mind if the Patriots took a flyer on him late in the draft. They were in love with him at the Shrine Bowl, and I think he'll be a good pro for a long time. Now, obviously, CJ Stroud, he's going to go in the top 5, 6, 7, but he showed out. Like a lot of people were impressed with his arm. Obviously, I've seen him on a consistent basis for 2 years now, so I know what he's made of. But I think a lot of people were surprised that he has such a big cannon. And then finally, Stetson Bennett. He's gonna be an interesting story because he has such heart, man. Like he ran a good time. He came in fairly well with his physical as well, and his arm looks good in the throwing sessions. But whoever takes him is gonna have a pro's pro that came through the fire at Georgia, and I think he's gonna do wonders in the NFL as well. So the combine, like it's one of those things where like it's just like people running around in shorts. But you could tell a lot by somebody's demeanor in those drills as well.
You think he can sneak into the first round?
Stetson Bennett? Absolutely not. No way in hell. No way in hell. Unless you get like really, really needy, he'll be there at day 2. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the other one, this is a story I heard, was it not Jason Voorhees? That's the Friday the 13th killer, but the offensive lineman from Stanford. He blew his ACL out.
ACL. USC, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep, USC. Blew his ACL out. This guy on one leg bench press 35 times. I mean, if you want to take and he was also a top 100 prospect on Daniel Jeremiah's board. So, I mean, if you're an offensive lineman needy team and want to ride it out for a year while he recovers, like, I wouldn't look at you funny, but I thought that was incredible. Blows his knee out. And it's like on the crutches, and it's not like the little wooden ones. It's like the one with like, you have like the arch in the front. And you put like a little cup holder type of deal on there. Like he was hobbling out there, did the bench press and hobbled his ass out of there, man. Like, nope, you are wired different if you're gonna do that type of nonsense right after you blow your knee out.
Yeah, that was nice. Any other comments or questions or topics you want to get to before we head out, or what are you thinking, man?
No, that's it. That's all I got, brother.
We plug it up. A commenter said this.
Parlays for life.
Yes. Wow. Good, Tara. Good.
Wow.
All right, brother, man. Let's plug it up.
All right. Well, this episode of the pod and previous episodes of the Pro Football Radio podcast can be found on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at. YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the page. Hit a little bell button. That'll make sure you're notified when these videos are dropped into your feed. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, Pro Football Radio Podcast. I'm on Twitter, Brando_Puma, and Jay Chima, the captain of the ship on the ones and the twos, is at Jay Chima. Sure to hit us up on social media. The DMs are open. And if you want to hear Jay Chima's strategy on parlays for life, definitely hit that man up. He will make sure you win all that cold, hard cash.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Vaya con Dios!